Oh, hey, Michael, how you doing? Just doing a little light reading. What's going on? You ready for the new intro?
Yeah, you ready?
Are you kidding? A new Star Wars Follies? I'm ready. Let's go. Bring it.
No, not that one. The Glenn Larson production. That's the one we're doing.
You got it, buddy. Ready when you are.
No, the other franchise. I mean, that's close, I guess. You know the one, right?
Yeah, sure. I just don't have any hats for that one.
Okay, Tom, you don't need a hat for the video. Just do it without the hat, okay?
And you think I'm annoying?
We gotta get back to the past, to the 20th century. Digging through the bubble wrap into your memories. Back was the collector, he's protecting what we find. Relentless heavy rhythms keep us safe through time. RetroBlasting.
This is not a toy.
Just the corners of your mind. RetroBlasting. The stuff you love since you were 9. We're blasting into the past to see what thrill still lasts. RetroBlasting.
The summer of 1977 lit a fire under the seats of every studio in Hollywood. Star Wars forced their hands. Science fiction was viable, popular, and wildly profitable. Every studio boardroom in Tinseltown on the morning of May 26, 1977 was probably asking the same question. What do we got? Some studios scrambled fast. Paramount turned their intended Star Trek Phase 2 television series into the first Star Trek feature film in 1979. Roger Corman, ever the opportunist, churned out Star Crash and Battle Beyond the Stars in short order. Universal decided TV was more fertile ground. They greenlit Glenn Larson's Battlestar Galactica and brought Star Wars special effects alum John Dykstra and concept artist Ralph McQuarrie on board. A feature film was made from the pilot episode and released a few months before the weekly series in the fall of 1978. While in production on Battlestar, Universal was already working to develop another science fiction series with Glenn Larson, Buck Rogers in the 25th Century. With a successful strategy now established, Universal filmed a movie for Buck Rogers as well, which landed in theaters in 1979, starring Gerard as the title character and Erin Gray as Colonel Wilma Deering. With some additional scenes filmed, this would become the two-part pilot for the weekly series. Buck Rogers effectively replaced Battlestar Galactica. The latter series was canceled after studio execs futzed with the scheduling and killed Battlestar's decent ratings in favor of Mork and Mindy. Battlestar Galactica was a saga with an epic, evolving plot. Buck Rogers was less so, a lighter, more swashbuckling affair with an adventure of the week format.
Buck Rogers was huge. It was huge because everybody was still hungry for Star Wars. Anything that was remotely or even smelled slightly like Star Wars was something that was on the top of every kid's list, at least kids.
An amazing opening sequence set up the premise each week. Buck Rogers was an astronaut, blown out of orbit and frozen in his spacecraft for 500 years. The series begins with his spacecraft intercepted by the Draconian Empire and brought back to Earth, which is trying to claw its way back from a devastating nuclear war several centuries prior. The Draconians thaw Buck out and think he's a spy from Earth.
I think he's a very clever plant from the Federal Directorate of Earth.
A plant?
Yes, a spy.
The people of Earth think he's a spy for the Draconians.
Then it's true, he is working for the pirates.
I still don't believe it.
Well, you stand alone, Theo.
Buck's in a tough spot, and all he really wants is more Draconian morphine.
Disconnect the medication.
Oh, don't do that. I really love that.
Buck's only friends are Dr. Theopolis, a sentient entity encased in an electronic apparatus, and Tweaky, the robot with the questionably shaped head that carries Theopolis around his neck. Tweaky was voiced by legendary voice actor Mel Blanc, but that doesn't excuse the shape of his head.
The fact that Tweaky's head looked like a... I didn't pick up on that. I didn't pick up on that until the joy of the internet decades and decades later. And now once you read something like that and you see a picture of Tweaky's innocent looking dome head, you can't unsee that.
The opening pilot focuses on Buck winning over the trust of Colonel Wilma Deering and prove to the Federation that the Draconians are lying to them and intend to conquer Earth.
Did the transmitter we secreted aboard his ship provide the necessary information to bring my father's forces through their defense shield?
It also gives Buck a chance to disco dance with the evil Queen Ardala.
It's expressive.
It's disgusting.
Buck was living in 1987, and apparently in that 1987, in that alternate universe, disco was still number one. And I have to admit, I'm a big disco fan. Maybe not dancing exactly, but the music from the 70s, the late 70s, will always be... I'll always have a place in my heart for the disco of the 70s. So I'm a little like Buck Rogers, I guess.
Just let yourself go. Let it go. Go with the music. That's it, right? Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
I love disco.
If Battlestar Galactica was budget Star Wars, then Buck Rogers is Battlestar Light. With both of them being Glenn Larson productions within a year of one another, the production style is naturally very similar between the two.
As far as Battlestar Galactica and Buck Rogers goes, I don't know if one is better than the other. I think they rate pretty highly, just slightly below Star Wars as far as entertainment goes. And the great thing about it is, during the 70s and early 80s, you didn't have to wait 3 years for a new episode to come out. You only had to wait a week. So that was pretty cool.
In fact, the amazing starfighter from the series is an early Ralph McQuarrie concept for the Viper fighters in Galactica. I'd argue the starfighter design whips the Viper handily.
The special effects as far as the starfighters and that kind of thing, the battles in space, were good. You can't really get any better. Of course, there was no CGI to speak of. So as far as the sets and the special effects for Buck Rogers, I think they were pretty top-notch for their time.
The special effects are quite good for the period, given the lower TV budget, and they repeat shots fairly often, which is understandable because these weren't cheap to produce. Without a huge budget, Draconian ships often became the ships of other enemies, so the effects could be recycled. The Federation starfighter had slight mods to the model to explain why some were single-seaters and two-seaters and even four-seaters depending on the demands of the script. By today's standards, the dogfights are somewhat slow and clunky, but the same could be said of some of the original effects in the first Death Star battle in Star Wars. Speed up the shots slightly, and they age quite well. The costumes, on the other hand, don't pass the test of time. The white-ribbed spandex with rainbow armbands and stirrup pants is very much a 1970s look at the future.
Maybe that was futuristic at the time, 1978, 1979. Yeah, I would say that it all had kind of a disco futuristic look to it.
There's no denying Erin Gray looked great in the costume.
Hi. I sure like men in uniforms. Think there's any way we could get together?
But by all accounts, nobody on the set liked those uniforms, and the principal characters quickly found other things to wear as the series progressed. The strongest stories of the series to me are the pair of opening two-parters, the pilot, Awakening, and Planet of the Slave Girls. Awakening establishes the universe nicely. There's great interplay between the characters.
I don't believe we've had the pleasure.
I think you're mistaken, Princess. I never forget a knuckle.
And some fun action sequences.
I remember seeing that first episode, and it was everything that a kid wanted from Star Wars. It was fantastic. Characters were great. Buck Rogers was awesome. Wilma Deering was, of course, incredible. Princess Ardala was amazing. Tiger Man was awesome. So really, it was campy fun, which was pretty amazing because it took Star Wars slathered it with a good amount of cheese, and that's Buck Rogers.
I think I will have a drink now.
Plus, if you prefer to watch the movie version of this, you get a crazy Bond-style opening sequence of Buck Rogers and a bunch of women lounging on huge light panels to a cheesy adult contemporary song.
Searching my mind for some truths to reveal. What thoughts are fantasy? What memories real?
Erin Gray said the light panels were so hot, it was miserable trying to film the sequence without being burned. The pilot also contains a number of elements that are never explored again in the series, including the ruins of old Chicago and the mutant creatures that inhabit it. The Federation is based in nearby New Chicago. All of the cities on Earth mentioned in the show have New in front of their name. New Chicago, New Detroit, etc. New York is conspicuously absent. I guess the screenwriters couldn't cop to putting in a city called New York. I do think it's pretty amazing that Buck is able to locate the grave of his parents fairly easily, and that it survived in such good condition after 5 centuries and a nuclear holocaust. The second two-parter, Planet of the Slave Girls, is a nice organic follow-up to the pilot. Buck has resisted joining the Federation, and he finds himself vaguely competing for Wilma's affections with one Major Duke Danton.
Oh, Wilma. Don't forget drinks, $1,900 my place.
You know something, Buck Rogers? I'll be there.
Duke is a cool character, and watching him and Buck trash a classroom is admittedly pretty awesome. It's a shame that characters like Duke rarely made second appearances in the series. Planet of the Slave Girls deals with the planet Vistula that exports food to Earth, but the food has been poisoned. Buck, Wilma, and Duke head there to investigate, only to discover that the planet's rule has been subverted by a cult. You can tell the writers called it Planet of the Slave Girls to get more people to watch, because it's really a planet of slaves, both male and female. Roddy McDowall, at the height of his powers, plays the clueless ruler of Vistula, Governor Soroyan, while Jack Palance devours the scenery as cult leader Khalil.
You shall prevail!
Production value on this two-parter is just as high as the pilot. Okay, I'm not sure gold windbreakers would protect you from solar radiation, but that aside, the episodes have great sets and locations to give it the same sense of scale as the pilot. As an added treat, the original live-action Buck Rogers, Buster Crabbe, came back to do a cameo in this episode as Brigadier Gordon, in reference to him having also played Flash Gordon in the 1930s serials.
Hey, nice double teaming over there, whoever you are.
Gordon's the name, thanks.
We met Gordon?
I don't think so, Captain. We're from different times.
All in all, the 4 episodes that comprise Awakening and Planet of the Slave Girls give us the essence of Buck Rogers in the 25th century. I find I revisit these the most.
Any time that Buck Rogers had a 2-part episode, which left us on a little bit of a cliffhanger until the next episode was concluded, was always fun.
As the series progresses, the plots vacillate between decent and awful. And a few rules become evident. Beautiful female co-stars are a must, and celebrity cameos whenever possible.
Special effects, spaceships, and now with the introduction of scantily clad girls in a Star Wars-esque universe. It's pretty amazing for a kid that was 9 years old. I know I liked it.
For every Marky Post, there was a Frank Gorshin. For every Jamie Lee Curtis, there was a Peter Graves. For every Anna Alicia, there was a Gary Coleman.
Hi there.
Hey, it's the woman from War Games.
You've been a big help to us, Dr. Theophilus.
5 numbers, it's got half the code.
Erin Gray has stated her favorite episode was Space Vampire. The title alone tells you all you need to know about that one.
The horror in Wilma's eyes whenever the space vampire shows up, and before she is, of course, taken over by the space vampire. There's a lot of genuine acting there, which is great. And I have to say, as far as my favorite episode goes, Space Vampire is good.
The series is always firing on all cylinders when Draconian Princess Ardala returns to cause more trouble for Buck Rogers. Whether it's forcing him to marry her, cloning a duplicate of him to trick the Federation, or teaming up with Buck in the season finale to stop the evil war witch Tsarina, played to the hilt by Julie Newmar, from destroying the planet of Pendar. The series was doing well in the ratings. The chemistry between all of the main players was enjoyable to watch.
One wrong move, I'd look like a grilled cheese sandwich right now.
A grilled what?
Even though Buck and Wilma had a vague, undefined association that was more flirty friends than a true path to romance.
To go with her?
Major Marla Landers?
Oh, that Major Lander.
That might have been the smartest play, because it allowed for new male and female characters to appear each week and change the dynamic for an hour. A second season was approved. The audience loved the format of the show. Alas, Glenn Larson left the project, and a new producer took over, John Mantley, so of course he decided to inexplicably change the entire format of the show. The second season is so staggeringly bad it's hardly worth describing. Gerard said during a panel appearance in 2007 that he had to threaten to quit just to keep Erin Gray on the series because they were going to cut her out of the show. Dr. Hewer was gone, Mel Blanc no longer voiced Tweaky.
Yep. That's right.
Twiki likes it when we make up.
And Buck and Wilma were on a spaceship called The Searcher, looking for the lost tribes of humanity that escaped Earth during the nuclear war. A plot suspiciously similar to the setup for Glenn Larson's Battlestar Galactica. Why on earth would the network square peg the successful Buck Rogers into the round hole of Battlestar's failed format? The two-part opener, Time of the Hawk, introduces Dr. Goodfellow and his obnoxious robot Crichton. Erin Gray was now wearing a casino waitress outfit and stuck at the communications station. The final insult was replacing the awesome intro narrated by William Conrad.
And returns Buck Rogers to Earth 500 years later.
With the more nasally enthusiastic Hank Sims.
Ranger 3 was blown out of its planned trajectory into an orbit 1,000 times more vast.
I think the confusing thing that really threw me off every time I watched an episode in season 2 was the fact that Tweaky's voice changed.
Crichton, you are ordered to the bridge at once.
From Mel Blanc, the classic Tweaky that we got from season 1 came and went. So there were episodes where Mel Blanc would voice Tweaky's voice, and then there was some other guy, whoever that was, and he didn't even try to emulate Mel Blanc's amazing Tweaky voice. It was something else, and I don't know what it was, but it was jarring, and it wasn't Tweaky, and that really threw me off.
Arguably, the opening two-parter isn't terrible if you look past the loss of the entire format of the show. A bird guy named Hawk is angry at human pirates for killing his people. He starts attacking every human starship in his sights. Buck pursues him to stop the killing. In the battle, Hawk's mate is killed, despite Buck's best efforts to save her. Naturally, Hawk joins the crew of the Searcher. Of course he does.
I think Hawk was the reason season 2 wasn't a complete disaster.
It is sad that I must kill you. You are the only human for whom I have ever had some measure of respect.
Hawk was a great character. I would have loved to see Hawk in a spin-off episode with Alice or the Golden Girls, where Hawk just kind of lands his ship and hangs out with, like, Archie Bunker or Mr. Belvedere. That would have been phenomenal.
The few proponents of the second season argue it deals with deeper themes and issues, more like Star Trek or Battlestar Galactica. Less humor, more social messages. The problem here is that Buck Rogers made its success in the first season by being fun pulp space adventure.
Come here often? Guess you do.
Gerard himself said he recognized at the time that Hawk was a stand-in for Spock and Buck had become Captain Kirk. Changing the setting, tone, characters, and intent of the entire series effectively pulled the rug right out from under the audience.
Season 2 was a complete disaster, to be honest with you. I mean, there were some episodes that were actually pretty acceptable, but all in all, the new cast, that old crazy scientist guy, and that total pushover admiral or captain that was manning the Searcher was ridiculous. And the fact that they kind of downplayed Wilma Deering's role. She was always showing up in like a kind of a flight attendant outfit from the 60s. I don't know what that was. I appreciated it. Anytime I see Erin Gray in a little skimpy dress is fine by me, guys. Really, seriously. But I don't think that saved it. I think there were so many things that changed in tone and characters and situations. Everything changed in season 2, and it wasn't for the good. Once again, the only saving grace that I can see is Hawk, which was an incredible character.
After the 2-hour premiere of Time of the Hawk, the ratings bottomed out. John Mantley had inherited a hit and then broken it. They canceled it without fanfare in the middle of the second season on its 13th episode. Buck Rogers was a unique and popular blip in the history of the post-Star Wars sci-fi boom, and the series is remembered fondly based purely on the strength of the first season alone. Why second season producers couldn't comprehend this is baffling. The toy line's luck would be even worse.